Well, let's get talking this Monday afternoon. An outcome of the National Economic Council meeting held at the Council Chambers of the State House in Abuja is a review of palliative packages for Nigerians following the removal of petrol subsidy and the recent hike in petrol prices, up to 617 naira per litre as a result of market forces. NEC agreed on mass deployment of CNG-powered vehicles and establishment of auto-gas conversion plants. Kits in all states proposed provision of a cost of living allowances to be paid to civil servants in both the state, federal and civil state services across the board. Joining me to talk more on issues around this meeting, he is a partner, tax reporting and strategy with PricewaterhouseCoopers, Mr. Kenneth Erikume. It's great to start the week with you, Mr. Erikume. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Good afternoon, Tolu, and thanks for having me.
Yes. Let's start on this note. That meeting, that's the NEC meeting late last week, presided over by the Vice President. Many see it as coming at the right time. But first, let's start with an overview of what you make of the resolutions reached at that meeting. Can you, what is your first reaction to some of these decisions reached at that meeting?
All right, thank you very much, Tolu. So obviously I have reflected on the outcome of that meeting and the effect of some of the changes that have happened in the economy over the past couple of months. Just as way of background, the removal of fuel subsidy and the harmonization of the FX rates has led to some upside and some benefits to the economy, which we can see on two fronts. The first one is the fact that NNPC was able to declare an interim dividend of, I think, about 123 billion to contribute to the Federation account, right? Now, NNPC hitherto, before the changes, had to deal with the issue of subsidy on its balance sheet as well. You know, without this encumbrance, it allows NNPC to actually live its new objective, which is to be profit-oriented for the benefits of Nigerians. So I think that is one of the significant wins we can see from those changes. The other thing we can see is that, you know, and some people call it a record, the record June 1.9 trillion available as revenue to the three tiers of government. And of course, government has said they would only share out 907, which they, you know, commenced to do, and then retain about another 900 billion in an infrastructure fund. Of course, that infrastructure fund has raised some controversies as people begin to ask the question of whether the NSI is not suited for that purpose. But it's important to realize that, you know, this record revenue to be shared or saved, as the current case is, only materializes because we've been able to do away with the leakage in fuel subsidy and the exchange rates have been harmonized. And if you were going to just share the oil revenue based on the new rates, it could significantly increase. So these are some of the benefits. Now, the big question is, how do you then deal with the issue of the removal of fuel subsidy? And I think that was the burning issue in front of the NEC in that meeting. And it's a very, very complicated issue to deal with because, you know, if you save or if you unlock, not save, but you unlock this new revenue stream from subsidy, how do you ensure that the most vulnerable in the economy actually get some benefit immediately to mitigate some of the impact of that removal? Um, and I think that um, conversation, the direction of that conversation was very positive for me, because in a lot of the states, the public sector and the public servants are usually the ones, sustaining quite a bit of the economy, especially in the lower income states. And if one is able to deal with the backlog of pension payments and salary payments to that group of people, you would have done a lot in the right direction without any leakage, because it gets to the right people. Because that's one of the major challenges of any scheme to mitigate the impact of fuel subsidy. But the second, issue around, apart from dealing with the historic obligations, but also even releasing some additional cash to public servants is also good, because obviously you can clearly identify them. They are easily identifiable, and it's easy to get the monies into their hands. So again, it's for me, I consider it to be a step in the right direction. Um, and I think that all the other conversations, around the fact that, the federal government should not be the one administering this scheme. And I've said this several times in different forums and conversations, that the way revenue is shared in Nigeria, is not optimal, because, for you to get to the grassroots, you need to be working closely with the state government, and you need to be working closely with the local government. Now, the plan for, the elimination of the utilization of the social register, or the cash register of the federal government, and instead using the state register, for me, makes a lot of sense. Because those are the people that are closer to the grassroots. As you can imagine, the local governments would have, full visibility of those that are impacted, by these economic changes, and will be able to get, the benefits to them directly. Bearing in mind that it obviously raises a risk around whether, these local governments will deal with the issue as they should, and it wouldn't result in leakages. But in an ideal world, I think that it's the right way to go. So I think that all the conversations here, were in the right step, but there obviously are some other things that the government should think about in terms of the, I've been trying to avoid the word palliative, but in trying to institute a sort of palliative to the most vulnerable. Yeah.
Indeed, we can't avoid that word at this particular time. Yes, I'm also impressed with that synergy, with the subnational now, in tandem with what the federal government intends to achieve. They need to be on the same page to be able to achieve this. But my next question to you now would now be, what is your take with regards to cost of governance? That is also something that everyone is talking about, that government must also look deep down and look for a way to address that. So what are you thinking? What runs through your mind with regards to cost of governance?
Yeah, absolutely, Tolu. And I'm sure that even if I was ignorant of the conversation, on social media, some of those conversations around, the cost of governance would have popped up. Particularly, the one that has been out there recently has been the cost of the convoys for different government officials, and the petrol that those convoys consume in any event. But that's just a simplistic way to look at it. I think the issue of cost of governance is actually much more complicated than just looking at, convoys here and there. The conversation around streamlining different agencies, MDAs, ministries, departments, and agencies, must come to the fore in terms of the conversation, because the people are they're faced with significant hardship at the moment. But the people, I must give kudos to the citizens of Nigeria at this point. They understand that the hard times will come and that some of the policies that we saw in the past were not sustainable. So people have tightened their belts and they are ready to face the storm. But what they're looking for is, that synergy between the citizens and the government, that, the citizens cannot be doing this alone. The government needs to look inwards and ask themselves, how can we optimize by streamlining some of these MDAs, making them more efficient? And for me, it's more around value, right? Because if government is able to provide value, then people will not be too bothered about cost. And value would be in terms of policies in the right direction, ease of doing business, and ensuring that the necessary infrastructure is in place for businesses, both the large corporates and the small and medium enterprises and micro as well, to thrive. And historically, we've seen government as a bottleneck in this regard. So government needs to sit up and ensure that all the MDAs are pro-citizens and pro-business. So that would be a step in the right direction. Now, other than that, I think that, government appreciates that a lot of fiscal reforms needs to happen in the space of accountability and fiscal responsibility, as well as transparency. So I expect that one of the things that will be at the fore of the conversation of this new fiscal reform committee is not just to generate revenue. And if you saw the press statement by the spokesperson of the Mr. President, it was very clear that it wouldn't just end at generating revenue. There would also be a significant focus on actual fiscal responsibility and ensuring that government is optimized. Secondly, that government continues to focus on delivering value to citizens, and that generally there's more transparency around public finance and its utilization. So those will be some of the things which we will see in the near future. And I think that the partnership between government and the citizens will be more fruitful if we can deal with some of those challenges.
Mr. Ikuma, before I let you go, having an increase in the minimum wage seems to be a step in the right direction, but many are also looking at the inflationary impact of this development, of this move, what it will cost. We are not all civil servants, so a percentage of Nigerians are civil servants and they will benefit clearly from this minimum wage step in the right direction. But how can we side by side manage inflation considering what we face at the moment?
Tolu, I must tell you that it will be very, very challenging to deal with the issue of inflation. What we're seeing here is multi-pronged. So we're seeing the harmonization of the FX. We're seeing the removal of the fuel subsidy. The removal of the fuel subsidy on its own would have an impact on everything in terms of domestic transportation, up to the cost of doing business for SMEs. Because when you begin to go to the level of using diesel generation, most of those players are either in the shopping malls, in the cities, and are already straddling the medium-sized business strata. For the micro and small, a lot of them still use the petrol generators, and I'm talking about those that use the barbing salons, the tailor by the roadside, and those sort of businesses. So inflation would be expected, right? Both food inflation and the inflation generally. So what the government can do at this stage is to ensure that the other complementing policies are consistent with what government is trying to do. So, for example, I'll give you a simple example. You shouldn't have implementation of a policy that will be contra or aggravate the issue of inflation at this time. So when subsidy was removed, we had an immediate press statement out. Well, not a press statement, news out there saying that customs was beginning to charge VAT on importation of diesel. Now, when you have that sort of, outcome or event happening at the same time, it could escalate the issue of inflation. So government needs to look at other pressures and try to manage them and ensure that those policies are consistent. In addition to that, I think we now need to take, accelerate the step around boosting domestic production on every side. And I think that this is why the government has been thinking about the issue of fertilizers and getting it directly to the farmers. So from a food perspective, we need to boost production. But even in terms of our exports, the exports of agri commodities, the issue of the exportation of our crude oil, and dealing with the issue of oil theft, and also a clear policy around, exporting our brains. And one of my former partners, Andrew Nevin, spent a lot of time in developing the thought around this issue. We are a low-income country at the moment. We have a highly educated workforce, and we speak English. There's no reason why we should not be playing, significantly in the global outsourcing, value chain in the current, situation that we have a global world. So I think that we need to look at those sort of policies that boost production and ensures that there's no misalignment in terms of the policy direction of the government. Yeah.
Brilliant.
But so the removal of the increase in the minimum wage would obviously have an inflationary impact. There's no way to avoid it.
About it.
Yeah.
I must thank you so much. Brilliant submission as usual, Mr. Kenneth Erikome. He is a partner tax reporting and strategy with PricewaterhouseCoopers. Do have a beautiful week.
Thank you very much, Tolu, and nice chatting with you.
All right, then.